Hello there, friends and sane persons. My name is Kyle. It's Wednesday, which means it's time for another episode of Wednesday Whimsy. I know I'm excited. I hope you are too. If it's your first time joining us on a Wednesday or any other day for Wednesday Whimsy, what this show is it's a short show, 25 minutes, where I'm going to be talking about some board game related topic. Sometimes it'll be my thoughts about a game I've been playing. Sometimes it'll be a top 10 list. Sometimes it'll be some other sort of board game related topic. Usually, well, hopefully it'll be fun. I'll have a good time. I know that. And I hope somebody out there will get some value out of it as well. Today, what we're going to be talking about is another game, and it's a game that I had been playing recently. If you will recall, last week I did a list about my top 10 solo games. And so I went through several games that had solo modes or were designed specifically for solo play. And I told you that there were several games that had not made the list. This one had not made the list because I just hadn't played it enough. But it probably might if I were to redo the list in the future. So it's really quite good. The game is called, and I've got it right here. It's called Batman. The Dark Knight Returns. So you can see it's a pretty big box. This is the deluxe edition. It has one box of game components and one box of miniatures, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But it's a pretty big game. So let's kind of get started and talk about what it is and kind of what it's about. So what the game is it's based upon a comic series, a graphic novel series that came out, I don't know, a while ago. That's called The Dark Knight Returns, and it tells the story of Batman. He's been in retirement for about 10 years. It takes place in the 80s, based upon the events that happen. And he comes out of retirement and goes back into Gotham City and decides to be Batman again. But the world's kind of forgotten about him. Well, not forgotten, but he's just sort of been out of the game for a while. He's older. Different, right? It's an interesting story. It's a scenario based game, I guess a campaign game, where you're going to play through 4 different scenarios, and you play them back to back to back to back. It's ideally designed so that you will play through the entire story, and if you lose at any point, well, you're supposed to start all over again. You can also take a picture of the game and save your progress in between the different books if you would like. Either way, I played it all the way through. I found it to be enjoyable to do it that way. There are rules to play. It is a solo game. It's designed for solo, but there are rules that exist that come with it that can allow you to play it as a 2-player head-to-head game with one player controlling the villains and the other player controlling Batman. I have not played that version. It kind of feels tacked on. It's like, well, let's make it a 1 to 2-player game. It's really designed as a solo game. It's story-based. It's going to follow the story of this graphic novel series. I have not read that series. It seems like everybody else has. I have not, but I did watch the animated version, and I found it to be rather enjoyable. I watched it after playing the game for the first time, so it kind of opened a new door for me, and I found it to be very enjoyable. And I found it to be more enjoyable because I had the board game and sort of had these moments. Aha, that's what this was in the game. And so it takes about 90 minutes to play. That's what the box says. For me, it ended up taking about 60 minutes per scenario, plus some learning time. Once you've got the rules down, though, it'll probably get to be faster. You can play it in one-offs, but again, that's not how it's designed. So that's kind of what the game is, a solo story-based campaign game, also kind of a legacy game. I'll get into more of that in a minute. So how does it work? Well, you're going to be taking the role of Batman, and you've got a story. It's going to set the stage for you. You've got this board, and let me see if I can share the screen here. I'm sure I can. Here is, give me just a moment to figure out how to do this. So you've got this board, and the board is going to be essentially, it's going to show you Gotham City, and it's going to have different areas that are on it, and you're Batman, and you're moving around. And here we go. I figured out how to do it now. So here we go. This is a picture of the board. So this represents Gotham City. You'll see that there are various different paths. See if I can zoom in a little bit. Different paths, and you're going around Gotham City. There are tokens that are going to be put out, and these tokens are just these little tiny things that represent the press or a mutant gang. There are also some that represent the cops, and you're going to be trying to keep any of those from getting out of hand. You're going to be trying to fulfill different objectives. And so every turn is going to follow a pretty easy sequence. If you look, and we'll talk about this when we talk about what's special about the game, the first thing you're going to do is I'm going to take this off for a minute and show some of these cards. You're going to deal yourself 12 event cards. And the cards come in two different types. You can sort of see them here. There are detective cards and fight cards. And each card has two things it can be used for. It can be used to give you some sort of a bonus, or it can be used as a sort of negative event. All of the events are always negative. And what you're going to do is you're going to take 3 of these cards, you're going to look at them, and you're going to choose 2 to keep for yourself to use for their positive text, and then 1 you're going to put into the event card deck, which is going to be a 4-card deck. You're going to do this process 4 times total. And so you're going to have a sense of what cards are in the event deck, what's going to be coming up. And then each round of the game, you're going to go through 4, I guess they're called rounds and then turns. I was confused with that. But each turn, you're going to flip over 1 event card and resolve it. And because you were able to sort of pick out which cards were going to be in that pile, you have a sense of what might be coming, what you have to watch out for, etc. The next thing you're going to do, let's go back to the screen here, is on the side of the board, you'll see over here there's this track, and this track is well, that really zoomed in, didn't it? I'm wondering. There we go. This track is also really kind of key. So every game is going to have a number that you write in there. The rules will tell you which one. For the first scenario, it's 7. And then you're going to have to allocate, because this is a dry erase board, you're going to write down on each of these little flame symbols a number. And the total of all 4 of these numbers has to equal whatever was in here, in this case, 7. And you're going to put these tokens out here, and you'll flip them up so you'll know what parts of the city they show. But at the end of the round, you're going to be putting whatever number you wrote in here, that many of this type of bad token. In this case, let's say I put a 2 in there. I'd have to put 2 mutants into whatever area of the city this shows me. So you're going to kind of set that out so you can see both what events are coming and how many bad guys are going to be popping up. It is a little bit random because you will shuffle the event deck and you don't know what order things are going to come out, but you have really a surprising amount of control over your destiny. You're then going to move yourself around and you're going to follow these paths. You'll see that there are, it's kind of fun that I can zoom in like that. There are these paths that go between the different areas. You can move as far as you want within one area, and you can move 1 space into a new area. And at the beginning of the game, some of these areas are just really blocked off. But over the course of the game, you're going to take your pen and draw routes. You can connect different areas to make it easier to get around the board. Then you're going to fight if you want to. You can also activate your ally. You have an ally at the beginning of the game. It's Commissioner Gordon. And later on in the game, you get Robin and eventually the Green Arrow, who can go around and help you do something. They have different activities. They are different actions they can do. And then you're going to do a fight if you'd like to. Or if you don't want to do a fight, you can what's called sneak, which means ignore the fight. And then each of these spaces has a different action in it. So depending on which space you went to, well, that's going to help you do something, right? This space is going to heal you. This one up here, this green one with a house, that's going to heal your sanity. You can get rid of cops or press or mutants, affect the doomsday clock. And all of these things are really going to try and help you prolong the game so that you avoid losing. Because if ever you've got 3 health stats, grit, health, and sanity, if ever any of those reaches 0, you lose the game. If you make it through 16 turns and you haven't reached your objective, you lose the game. if you run out of riots. So if there's too many tokens in one of these regions, a riot token goes out on there. And if there's too many of those on the board, you lose the game. And there's also this doomsday clock, which is like, 1980s and 70s sort of Cold War type doomsday. And if that ever reaches 12, well, the game's over and you lose. So you're trying to avoid losing and trying to win by accomplishing whatever objective the game's trying to get you to do. It's very simple. There's dice-based combat. You'll roll dice for yourself. Oh, and these are kind of fun. Let me show what these look like here. The dice in the game are are batarangs, and they have different symbols on them, which are, the nice, famous old Batman POW. Uh, and you'll roll them and use different abilities to manipulate them when you're in the combat. But another interesting thing is there's objectives that you're trying to, like side goals. And when you complete the side goals, sometimes they'll let you discard one of these dice, which aren't all that good, and instead get one of these upgraded Batarang dice, which are going to let you have better chances of hitting, better odds, better actions that you can do with them. It's very interesting how you can do that as well. Anyway, you're going to go through this procedure. You take your turn, you take 4 turns, and then you do another kind of a reset where you'll reset the event deck, you'll reset that track of all the bad things that are going to come up, and then you'll take another 4 turns, and you keep going until you win or you lose. There's usually some story moments and some objective you're trying to fulfill. If you fulfill it, you move on. If you don't fulfill it, well, then you're eventually going to run out of time. So that's really how the game works. So let's talk a little bit now about what makes it special, because I wouldn't be talking about it if it wasn't something special. So there's a couple of things that really make this game stand out. The first one is that thing I talked about a moment ago, the setup with the event cards, right? The fact that you have so much control over it. There's 3 cards that come out. All of them give you something good if you keep them. All of them do something bad if you don't. But you get to choose which one of those bad things is going to happen at some point, and so you can prepare for it. Like this card says, add any 1 mutant to downtown. Well, that's probably okay, right? There's probably room for one of those. This one says, move the Doomsday Clock forward by 2 spaces. Well, I don't want to do that, so maybe I'll keep that one for myself. Or there might be some that say, okay, look, the negative effect is you can't do this certain action this turn. Well, if you weren't planning on doing it anyway, you can plan it in such a way that you can prepare for a bad turn that's coming, and you have a lot of control, and that really makes the game feel not random. It makes it feel like you are really making good and meaningful choices, and your destiny is largely in your own hands. Another thing that I really like is, I already talked about that track where you're writing down all the numbers of the bad things, these villainous tokens that are going to come out. So you know where they're going to come out, and you know how many are going to come out, and you get to choose where they go. So, if you've already cleared out downtown, well, maybe you say, okay, let's just have them all. Well, I've got to put 7 total on the board this round. I'll put the bigger number in downtown, and the other areas that are a little bit more full, I'll hold off on those. Or you can say, well, I mean, the game needs me to be in this area, so I'm going to load that area up because I know I can take care of it. It's really nice because there's just a whole lot of planning that can go in, and you really feel like you're in the driver's seat as you're setting up for the bad things that are going to happen to you. I think those are 2 mechanisms that really should come across into other games. I would love to see cooperative games where you just have a lot of control, not 100%, but enough that you feel like you can make meaningful choices. I find that to be really interesting. Another thing that I like is this dry erase board. I already talked about that, but as the game goes on, you're going to write things down on there, and that allows you to kind of upgrade and customize spots. I showed you an example of kind of the blank board, but here's an example of mine midway through the game. You can see, can I zoom in on here is the question. I think I can. Well, not very much. But you can see I've drawn some paths here so that it's easier to get into certain areas. I've written some keywords. This spot over here in the middle by this tank, which is something you can get, which is always fun. This space here has been upgraded. so that if I do that action, I get to do it twice. You're slowly making different choices and changing things about the game as you go through it, and the board will become customized. Areas can become destroyed. And when it's destroyed, well, now it can't be used anymore, and it's going to be easier for that area to fall into riot. And you'll just cross it off with that dry erase marker when it's destroyed. You're going to just be changing a lot of things, and you can, sometimes a path gets destroyed. In that case, you just erase it. You can have things become one way. It's really interesting and really fun how it all kind of just evolves as the game goes on. You really feel like you're playing a story and you're making your plans. You're saying, okay, look, this area over here is really hard to get into. So I've got to kind of build around that so that I'm able to get in and out when I need to. I like that you can upgrade your dice. It's fun to kind of have something to work toward and eventually get to where you feel you're doing pretty well in combat. But obviously, the enemies are going to get harder too as you go along. I also really like the story. The story is fascinating. Each round, there's a Batman villain that you're fighting, sort of a big bad. The first one is Two-Face. The second round, it is a mutant leader who's kind of a big thing in the comic. And then the third round, you've got the Joker, but you've also got the police commissioner, the new replacement for Commissioner Gordon. And her first act as commissioner is to issue an arrest warrant for Batman. And so she's slowly chasing you down and getting in your way. And then you've got the Joker as well, who comes out and is doing Jokerish things. It wouldn't be Batman without that. And then in the meantime, Superman is doing things elsewhere in the world. In the story, he's down fighting the Soviets, and that's making the doomsday clock accelerate a lot faster. So you've got to kind of manage that and plan for it. And then in the final round, you're up against Superman himself, and I find that one to be really fascinating because he's Superman, and so you don't have to beat him. You just have to survive. But every round, he's going to show up and pound you, and you're trying to use the tools that you have to weaken him in such a way that you're able to survive to the end of the 16th turn. Really an interesting story and a nice way to kind of represent these two unmatched sides in battle. I found the story to be really interesting. It was so interesting it made me go and investigate the source material. I really liked it. So there's a lot of special things. There's also these side goals that you're working on. You can choose to do them. You can choose to ignore them. But they're always going to give you some kind of an advantage if you're able to devote some effort to them. And those can come in really handy as well. So a lot of things that make this game really special and not feel like anything else. It's also a solo game, and there aren't many good campaign solo games other than larger cooperative games that have been kind of played as a solo game. This one, it just feels like it was designed from the ground up to be a solo game for a solo gamer to have a great story and a great experience. So a lot of things make it special. So where's the but? Well, it's not a perfect game, right? Perfect is hard, but there's not a lot, right? There's not a lot that's wrong in this. I am going to talk about a few things. One of the things is that the rules they're not bad, but they're not organized in a way that makes them easy to reference. And the player aids, there's one that shows you the structure of the round, but there might have needed to be another one for combat, another one for different icons that you'll see. Some of these things, it becomes natural and intuitive after you've gone through it a little bit, but it could have been better organized, and there could have been some player aids that would have made some things a little bit easier to manage. I found that I had to go back into the rule book a lot, and then it wasn't very well organized, so I was constantly flipping. Also, the size of the rule book. There's 5 rule books in the game, one for each book. This one is the chapter 4 one, and it's not very long because by then you already know it. But look how big it is. It's just this unwieldy size that it's going to take up a lot of space on the table. It's difficult. It's just not very user friendly. Its format, its layout, I guess. Another thing that maybe another negative is the game is quite long, right? I mentioned it's an hour per scenario to 90 minutes per scenario. And for the full experience, you're playing all 4 scenarios. So it's going to be a really long time. Also, I mean, as a solo game, that's great, especially if you have a place you can leave it set up. But You just have to know that you're not going to be able to get in and get out. There's a lot of setup, and then there's a lot of game. The next thing that's maybe a little bit negative is the board is really long, and this game is designed for a solo player. It would have been better if it were I guess, a portrait format, I don't know, landscape format, just because you're constantly reaching all the way up to the top, and it's just not going to fit very well on the table. Another thing that's maybe a little bit negative, and this is I mean, these are all small things, but the card layout, right? You've got some pretty tiny text down here, and it's all of the information that's useful is here. And up here is some kind of grayed out artwork from the comic. And it really could have been a lot better used. You hardly notice the artwork because it's so muted, but the text on these could have been a lot bigger, which would have made it a little bit more usable, user friendly. Um, the box, there's no way to store stuff in the boxes. I'll just the two little boxes are very thin. When put together, they're very big. It comes with an insert, but the insert is worthless. It stores the cards and nothing else, so it's not easy to keep it organized. I mean, there are ways to do it, but that's going to be a challenge. And also, I guess finally, the board is kind of ugly. It's just colors. It looks kind of. It's just. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I'll say that. But all of the components, I guess I would say, they're not amazing. The board is very functional and really, it feels unique. That wasn't the one I was going to show. Let's look at the pictures online. You can sort of see it's just very there. I don't know that I found it to be a beautiful board. And the miniatures that come with the deluxe version, they're not the greatest, right? I mean, here we have Two-Face, the Mutant Leader, the Joker, and Superman. If you want to paint them, I guess they might look better, but on the whole, they're just okay. So those are some negative things. Again, nothing serious, right? The game's very playable, very fun. There are just some sort of user interface type things that might have been they might have been welcome. So the final question, and let me close this window so we don't interfere, is what's my final rating? Well, I mean, I think this is a masterpiece of a solo game. It is one of the best solo games I've played. It's not going to be for everyone because it's long and involved. But if you like Batman, I mean, there's that. It is hands down the best Batman game that's out there. Now that's kind of like saying you're the tallest dwarf, right? It's there aren't very many good Batman games. There was that huge one that came out, the Gotham City whatever game that was kind of a disaster. There just aren't very many, and this is by far the best one. But it's good as a game anyway, not just good as a Batman game. So it's really good. It just feels like so much thought was put into it, so much story, so much to enjoy, so much to look at. I would rate it somewhere between a 9 and a 10, so I'll just go at a 9.5. It's hands down one of the best solo games that you can get your hands on, and so I very highly recommend it. Anyway, that is Batman: The Dark Knight Returns, the solo board game. One that I really enjoyed, and I'm looking forward to playing again. And I've had a good time talking to you about it. So go out there and check it out if you like solo board games. If you're not a solo gamer, then you can skip this one. There's no real reason to buy it for anything other than solo play. But if you do like solo, or you do like Batman, or if you're like me and like both, then this is absolutely a winner for you. And that brings us to the end of another exciting Wednesday Whimsy. I've had a great time talking to you, and I will see you next week. Next week, we are doing my top 10 travel games, and so that'll be kind of fun to see games that work well on the go. But until then, I wish you a wonderful evening, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Oh, I guess I